All right, so let's go ahead and build our first theme together. All right, so we're going to base this off of the Fjord theme from the marketplace. So if any of you are interested in taking a look at that, please feel free to take a look at the themes that our engineers have created for us. But let's go ahead and build ours from scratch. All right, so I'm going to come down and open up my terminal. All right, if you don't already have Liferay running, make sure that is up and running as well, and you are logged in so we can go ahead and build this, deploy it, and take a look at how it actually works on the platform. Otherwise, in your terminal or command line, go ahead and navigate to the Liferay folder. So I've already navigated to the Liferay folder. Remember, that should be user home Liferay for us on Mac or Linux, and then C Liferay for those of you on Windows. All right, from here, we're going to go ahead and run yo liferay-theme. All right, and this is going to be how we build our theme. So nice and easy. We just need to input a little bit of information here, and then we are good to get started. All right, so I'm going to call this the Livingston Fjord theme. All right, so go ahead and type that in and hit enter. And we're going to keep that ID as well. All right, then we're going to go ahead and select 7.1. All right, you notice that you can also create themes on 7.0 using these tools for those of you who may be interested in creating themes on older versions of Liferay. All right. Okay, so what this is going to do is this is going to bring in all of our dependencies for us. All right, this might take a little bit longer depending on your system. And once this is done, what we get to do is we get to go ahead and point this to our app server so that when we run gulp deploy, it knows where to go. All right. So if this is taking a little bit longer for you, feel free to pause the video and wait till this is all done, and then you can go ahead and start up and follow along. All right. So once this is done, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter next to the local app server. All right. And I have my Tomcat here. Okay, in my bundles folder. So I'm going to just go to user home Liferay and then bundles, and you can actually join me here on Windows as well. We can actually either just copy and paste the path for Windows, or we can just drag the folder in for Mac. All right, so I'm going to go to bundles, DXP. All right, I'm going to find my Tomcat folder, and then I'm going to go ahead and drag my Tomcat folder into the terminal. All right, again, you can go to copy paste it in the command line as well. And go ahead and hit enter. All right, here we're going to go ahead and use the default URL as well. And we are good to go. So this gives us our base theme to work with. And we can actually see what the base theme looks like by just simply deploying our new theme. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Let's navigate to our new theme. And then let's go ahead and use gulp deploy. All right, so we're going to navigate to our Livingston Fjord theme. Hit enter. All right, and let's go ahead and run gulp deploy. All right, so what this is going to do is it's going to build our theme for us. It's going to package it up, and it's going to deploy it to our app server. All right, so in our theme, we'll actually see the build folder. If I come back up here and go back to user home Liferay, we'll see our Livingston Fjord theme. All right, and we'll see our build folder, and this will contain all the base theme files. So again, in real practice here for your own custom themes, what you'll want to do is you'll want to take the folders and files from the base theme, place them into source, and that's where we're going to have all of our customizations. So for those of you who have worked with older versions of Liferay before, you might think of the source folder as our diffs folder. All right, this is where we keep our customizations distinct from the build, and we'll talk about that as we continue on here. All right. All right, so now that it is deployed, we can go ahead and turn it on the platform so that we can see our changes as we make them. So go ahead and come back to your browser. All right, make sure you are logged in. Again, we're using that Josiah Copeland account for this. All right, make sure your menu is open, and we're going to go to Build Pages in this Site Administration panel here. All right, and this is where we can turn on our theme for the public pages of our default site. So click on the configuration little cog there, All right, so come down and click Change Current Theme, and we're going to go ahead and select the Livingston Fjord theme here. All right, again, this is just going to be the base theme, and we can click Save. All right, and then we can go ahead and click on Go to Site to see what it looks like by default. All right, so this is our base theme. You'll see here we still have things like the title of the site, our navigation, and the footer. And of course, we have this content section in the middle where we can add our widgets and content later on. So now we want to go ahead and make our modifications. All right, so to do that, we need to go ahead and modify the structure of our source folder to include all of the aspects that we want to go ahead and change. And then we can add in those actual files and make those changes. All right. So go ahead and open up your Livingston Fjord theme. All right, and go into the source folder of the Livingston Fjord theme. You'll see we already have a CSS folder and a web INF folder. All right, so what we want to do is we want to add the other folders that we want to change, and this needs to directly reflect the build folder. So let's start with the images folder. We're going to add our own custom images, so we can go ahead and click on New Folder, or just add a new folder, and name it Images. Nice and simple. All right. We'll do the same thing for JavaScript. So I'm going to add a new folder and just call it JS. All right, and we're also going to do the same thing for our HTML files. And these are going to be in a templates folder since we are using FreeMarker templates for our HTML markup. Okay. All right, so we have templates. All right, again, this is going to directly reflect what we see in build. So if I were to open up the build folder here, I should see that build and source have the same folder structure. Okay. Now, again, the reason for this is because when we deploy our theme, it's going to deploy the build that is the base theme first, and then it's going to deploy our changes on top of that we have included in source. So everything we want to change about the base theme, we need to have mirrored in the source folder. All right. Okay, now you'll see some instructions on the page that have an optional set of instructions for running Gulp Watch. I'm going to go ahead and avoid that for now. Gulp Watch tends to have some issues when building the theme still. So I'm going to go ahead and just run Gulp Deploy once we get to the end of each section. If you'd like to test Gulp Watch, feel free. That's totally up to you. But if not, you can just go ahead and follow along with me and run Gulp Deploy when we are good to go. All right. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set some variables that we can work with. Now, we'll get into this in more detail a little bit later on, but go ahead and open up your exercises. I have my exercises right next to my actual theme source. I would definitely recommend doing the same for you since we'll be jumping back between the two as we continue the hands-on exercises throughout the course. All right, and go to that 03 theme development section. Okay. We're going to spend most of our time in this first section called generating a theme. So go ahead and open that up. And we will have an exercise source that is distinct from the actual theme source. So you can go ahead and open that up as well. All right, and we have a structure here that we can pull from. Okay, now like I said, in real life, when you're doing this, you will take whatever files you want to modify from the build folder in your theme. But for our purposes, to simplify things, we've included a number of files that are either pre-written for us or that give us some hints as to where to put things like snippets or write in some of our own code. So let's go ahead and open up the web INF folder for the exercise source, and we're going to copy this Liferay lookandfeel.xml. Once you have that copied, I'm going to go ahead and come over to our theme source, and I'm going to replace the current Liferay lookandfeel.xml in our theme with the one from our exercises. Okay. Now, why did I do this? Let's go ahead and open this up. The default Liferay lookandfeel.xml has some decorators that we can work with, and we'll actually talk about those later. What we're doing here is we're basically presetting what are called some theme settings so that we can turn these into variables and use them in our templates. So our templates right now are going to assume some of these variables, but we will definitely come back to this and talk about how we can set theme settings in more detail. Okay? So for now, just make sure you have some of these theme settings here. I'm going to go ahead and close this. All right, and then we want to go ahead and add our templates folder from our exercise source as well. So I'm going to go to the exercise source, open up my templates folder. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy my files, go to my theme source, and paste them into my templates folder. Okay. Now, the build folder is not going to have all of these files. Some of these files we've created, such as the social media FTL and the footer FTL, as well as the footer navigation. But the portal normal, portlet, navigation, and init custom, you could just take straight from the build and modify on your own when you're creating your own custom theme. Okay? Again, for our purposes, we have these predefined files that we can work with. So let's go ahead and start by adding the portal normal to our editor. All right, now if you would like to take a look at the default portal normal, feel free to pause the video and go to the build folder and investigate what the actual default page setup is. All right, it might be worth taking a look at that so you can determine what kinds of changes you might want to make for your own theme. All right, for our purposes, we're going to go ahead and add all three of the major sections that we've talked about. So the header, the main section, and the footer. Okay. So let's go ahead and start by highlighting this section in the wrapper div. You'll see it's a comment that says insert snippet 01 here. All right, and since we added our snippets earlier, we can just go ahead and type LFR, and you should see these FTL options at the top. And the first one is the 01 portal normal header. So that's exactly what we want. Go ahead and select that, and that will include our entire header. Okay, now I'm going to save the file here. Let's go ahead and break this down. So just quite simply, we're using an if statement that's wrapped around the entire header using the show header variable. Now again, this is set up initially in that Liferay look and feel.xml, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But once we've turned it into a variable, we can set this if statement and make it actually configurable if you want to. Okay. From there, we have the header. We're using some Bootstrap and some Clay classes to give us some responsive design. You'll also notice we have some of these pre-created variables for us. These can be found in the init.ftl in that build folder. And these allow us to assume certain information about Liferay without having to do any fancy footwork. So things like the site's URL, we have the site name, the logo, CSS class, etc., etc. Then we have an if statement here for showing the site name. Again, we can make this configurable by using these if statements. All right, and we're using that variable show the site name here within the span. And then we also have this button section here, and this is essentially going to give us a nicer looking menu with some of the little icon bars that you might expect when we are viewing this page from a mobile device. Okay. And this last section here, we have an if statement for the navigation. Okay. So we are using some of the variables here, but basically what we're looking at is we have an include for the navigation.ftl. Okay, so I've mentioned this before. One of the better ways to handle the portal normal file is to keep it as clean as possible. And one of the ways you can do this is by including separate files that will contain their own code. So the default portal normal already does some of that, similarly to what we see here. And we're going to do some of that with files that we create ourselves as well. All right, so again, if you want to look at the default header, feel free to pause and investigate the default portal normal. All right, but we're going to go ahead and go to the second section here. It says insert snippet 02 portal normal main. So go ahead and highlight that, type LFR, and select the second snippet portal normal main. Okay. All right, I'll save this here. Now, this is actually not very different at all than what we see in the default portal normal. Okay, we've simply changed these tags to main, we've added the main role, and everything else more or less stayed the same. Okay. Now, what's important in this section is the fact that we have variables being used to pull in our layout functionality, as well as the portlet FTL being pulled here as well. Okay, so I've mentioned the portlet FTL is what controls the HTML of our widgets, essentially. All right, so I've mentioned the portlet.ftl is what controls the HTML structure of our widgets when they're displayed on a page. So if you want to modify that, you can modify the portlet.ftl. Okay, and in this last section, what we're going to do is we're going to actually add in the footer by including the footer.ftl. This will be a separate file where we can have all of our code included. All right, so we're going to get our hands dirty here, and we're going to actually type this in together. We're going to use an if statement for this to use the show footer variable to say if the show footer variable is true, then include the footer.ftl. Okay, again, these kinds of if statements with these variables allow us to make these pages configurable to administrators, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later. For now, let's go ahead and type in our if. Okay. All right, and we're going to use the show footer variable. All right, and then we're just going to close this to start. Okay, so go ahead and close that if statement. And then we're going to open it up and tab over to add our include. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and use the include directive. All right, and in our parentheses, we're going to go ahead and use the full templates path variable. All right, so that'll be full templates path. You'll see I can actually auto-complete it with Visual Studio Code. All right, and we have our footer.ftl. Okay, and then lastly, of course, we want to go ahead and close that tag. All right, so this will give us our footer include here so that we can add our footer code to the actual footer.ftl, which we have pre-created for you. Okay, this is a case where you would create your own custom file to keep the code separate. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up our theme templates and add the footer FTL into the editor. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and highlight the insert 03 footer FTL here. We're going to type in LFR, and we're going to go ahead and select that third snippet. Okay. All right, so we've added a few things here from the default Portal Normals footer. We're using some of those responsive classes again. All right. We're going to include the logo of the site here, okay, as well as some footer navigation. All right. Later on, we'll come back to adding some social media icons here as well. So we will come back to this. And then lastly, here at the bottom, we've just simply changed the powered by section to say Livingston Hotels and Resorts. And we may or may not have added a training link because we're sneaky. All right. Well, let's go ahead and open up our footer navigation FTL now that we have that included here as well. Okay. Again, this is just going with more of a modular approach and keeping our code distinct. All right. So I'm going to add this to our editor, footer navigation. Okay. And there's two sections here that we want to add for the footer navigation. We want to start by adding a sign in. All right. And we want to go ahead and add the actual nav itself. Okay. So go ahead and highlight the first comment here, insert snippet 04 footer nav sign in. Okay. And go ahead and type in LFR and find that fourth snippet. Okay. Now this is a statement that you can actually use anywhere in your own custom theme, but basically we're using the is signed in variable. Okay. So we're saying if you're not signed in, and then we're including a list here where we can have an anchor that uses some of our sign-in variables that are already available to us in the init FTL. Okay, so we have things like the sign-in URL, we have the login redirect, we have the sign-in text. All of these are pre-created for us. Okay, so we can just take advantage of some of those variables. All right, so this is something that you can take home with you if you need to go ahead and add a sign-in link anywhere through your theme. All right, and lastly, let's go ahead and add the footer nav here. So highlight that fifth snippet section here. Type LFR. Okay. And add that fifth snippet. All right. Now this is going to be a for each statement using some of our nav items here. Okay. These are variables, again, that are already pre-created for us. And we're basically listing out all of the site pages and their URLs, okay, using links. All right, so basically what this will end up doing for us is it will end up adding every single page that's actually added on the Livingston Hotels and Resorts site. All right, so again, you can take that home with you as well. and we have completed our new HTML changes. All right, so again, these are some custom files that we have added. If you'd like, you can pause the video. You can explore some of the other files we haven't looked at, such as the portlet FTL, navigation, for example, or the init custom, which we'll actually come back to a little bit later, or go ahead and check out some of the other FrameMarker files in the build folder as well. I would highly encourage you to take a look at those. If you want to add or try some new things, even in this theme, feel free. All right, and then you can go ahead and continue on with us. All right, so now that we have all of our changes for the HTML, let's go ahead and deploy our new theme. So we're going to go ahead and come to our theme and run gulp deploy. All right, and this is going to, of course, deploy our HTML changes for us. And once we give it a few seconds, we'll be able to take a look and see our changes. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Go ahead and navigate to your browser. I'm just going to go ahead and refresh here. All right, and once it is refreshed, we will see that we have made our HTML changes here. We'll see our logos, okay? And we can go ahead and continue on here with our CSS changes. All right, so with that, I'll see you in the next section.